G'day, Steve Morgan here from Australian Bass Tournaments and www.tacklejunkie.fish. That's the tackle testing and review arm of Fishing Monthly magazines. Now, one of the interesting things I've done this year is some lure tests. We've tested lures from various companies and from all depths from top to bottom. But of course, my eyes light up when I get to test a top water lure. And today we're going to talk about Imakatsu's Dilemma Popper. Now let's rewind a bit. Imakatsu is a Japanese brand. Here it is, love fish for life. Has to have the crazy Japanese logo with it. And it's distributed by FishTec Solutions in Australia. That's a company who brings in brands such as OSP, they bring in Edge rods from America designed by Gary Loomis, they bring in the Toray Japanese line, and they bring in the Castaic American soft plastics. And of course, they also do Imakatsu, which is a high-end Japanese lure brand. And I've had a few of these Dilemma Poppers over the years. They don't look too different unless you start looking at real differences than a $2 popper out of the specials bin at your local tackle shop. Sort of similar size, a little bit of a different design, but there is a whole lot more technology and I suppose thought process gone into this bait than the cheap bait here. And for a bait which is at the top end of the spectrum, like this Dilemma Popper costs around the same, or probably a little bit less than a bent minnow, but definitely over $30 retail for a bait. The question is, why do I need to spend that amount of money on a top water bait? And I'm going to tell you a few of those reasons here this afternoon. Now, my latest journey with the Imakatsu Dilemma Poppers came at the request of FishTec Solutions. They said, Morgo, we've got these great poppers, they catch fish, but they're not really getting as much traction in the market as I suppose they deserve. And this is from the guys that have a history selling these things, the bent minnows, which really do really well in the marketplace. So I picked some up on the way down to the Southwest Rocks ABT bream event, and of course I love my bream fishing, and I especially love my bream top water fishing. And when I did my research, I found out this is a bait. It's 60 mils long, weighs 4 grams, so it casts okay, but it casts even better because the weighting that's in the lure, there's one little bit of a weight under the chin, but right in the tail there's a small movable bait, and that gives you that sound, which was designed by the Japanese, and of course, some crazy Japanese designer with his head under the water saying, that sounds like a fleeing prawn. And it also helps the casting. So this is a great long casting lure that when the rattle's happening, it sounds like a fleeing prawn. Now you can fish this in a few ways. It's sort of a hybrid between a walk the dog bait and a little popping bait. You'll see right up the front here, it's got a real small sort of offset cut face, probably only a quarter of the size of the cheap poppers that you can buy at the tackle store, and it's got a small lip on the bottom which kicks out as well. You'll see in some of the cutaways here that when you pop this bait, it spits a little bit of water. Not a massive amount of water like a GT popper, just a small amount of water to mimic that little sound that a prawn makes when it's flicking. But of course, the way I love to fish these lures that I think brings in fish from a broad distance is to do that walk the dog retrieve. That's when the rod tip is just, during the retrieve, is just kicking down, and it makes that lure, again, as you see in the cutaway here, just back and forth, walk the dog. Now, if you're fishing for bream, that walk the dog retrieve is a great way to attract the fish at the start, but like all top water presentations for bream, you're going to have to stop that lure occasionally to let the bream come and eat it. Very rarely will a bream just come up and crunch tackle a top water which is on the top. A lot of the time it has to be still, and that tail has to be sitting down ready for them to grab on. Now you'll notice that on this Dilemma Popper, it's got a couple of chemically sharpened hooks that are exactly the right weight and gauge to hook fish, so you don't need to swap them, and one of them has the crystal flash tied on the tail. Now I'll show you why that's important. When you stop this bait, it sits like this in the water, and let's throw it in the test tank here. It sits quite head down, and I'll push it along the front so you can see it, and that tail sits at around a 30 to 40 degree angle down under the surface, which means when a bream comes up to grab it, where's it going to grab first? It's not going to grab the bit which is out of the water, it's going to grab this bottom hook here, or at worst it's going to grab that middle hook. So those hooks are very accessible to the fish. If I compare that to one of my other favourite lures, which is the Tiemco little red pepper micro, it doesn't sit down as low as that. So let's throw the red pepper micro in. It actually sits down a little bit further. you see that tail hangs a long way down, and if I compare it to the bent minnow actually sits fairly flat, and I think that's why a lot of fish come up to pull that bent minnow under so they can actually see what's going on. I drop a bent minnow in the water and see how flat that thing sits. It sits nearly flat on the water with those original OSP hooks on it. So its attitude in the water, in between my other two favourite topwater lures, and it's a great all-rounder when it comes to fishing for both bream and bass. You've seen some cutaway as we've been talking here about some of the great bream that I caught on the lure, and I used it to fill most of my bag for that Southwest Rocks event. But let's go on the water now and see how bass like this bait. So here we go, we've finally got it in the field, and we're down on the Macleay River in Kempsey in northern New South Wales, an absolute cracking bass river. Now the little Dilemma Popper, as I've told you, it's designed to imitate the shrimps, the prawns kicking along the top. It's just after sunrise here, and the best way to try it out, let's tie it on, see if we can catch an Australian bass on this Imakatsu. So I only got 4 pound leader this morning. Got some of the new Daiwa J thread leader. Should be plenty. The bass in here only average sort of 30 to 40 centimetres. I'm going to fish this popper over some weed beds. Sort of right near the area where I did really well in a recent ABT event down here on the Macleay. Like all topwaters, I just tie it on with a knot straight to the tying point. Don't need loop knots for topwaters, not on a 4 pound leader especially. Let's get in on. So there you go, on the pause, that little Australian bass just smashed the Dilemma Popper there. Shallow, weedy water, topwater's often the best way to fish it, and that looks, sounds and catches fish just like a little live prawn. So there you go. I suppose the take-home message is for bream, walk the dog and little pauses, lots of pauses. But for bass, maybe keep that lure going a little bit more, and only 1 or 2 pauses, and they can be short pauses during the retrieve. The bass seem to like that really aggressive retrieve, but both the bream and the bass think that this lure sounds just like a little shrimp and they jump on it. I suppose at the end of the day, the question is, am I going to pay low $30 for a topwater like the Dilemma Popper? After my experience with it, it's definitely, I had 1 or 2 of these in my box. I'm going to have 6 or 8 of those in my box when I start the 2019 ABT bream season. And I think if you would just enjoy your social fishing, you can fish them on heavier leader. I fished them on braid and a leader of at least 6 pounds if I didn't want to lose it. And if you use heavy leader, 6, 8, 10 pound, you don't lose many topwaters. You definitely don't lose any to snags. And if you're fishing with a heavy leader, you lose very few to fish as well. So I don't see why you'd pay 38 bucks for a bent minnow, but you wouldn't pay $32 for one of those Imakatsu poppers. You don't need that many of them. They're a good quality bait. They're available in Australia, and if you want more information, go to FishTecSolutions.com, or make sure you like FishTec Solutions on Facebook for any updates about new colours, new models, or new stuff these guys have got coming into the range. Do yourself a favour, check out the Imakatsu Dilemma Popper.